A human newborn cannot walk, talk, feed itself, or regulate its own body temperature, and has no concept of what a predator is, even though predators know exactly what it represents. Weighing roughly 3 kilograms, a human infant is, bluntly, a biological catastrophe waiting to happen. Yet every person alive today descends from an unbroken chain of ancient humans who kept something this fragile alive long enough to reproduce, repeatedly, across 300,000 years. If even one ancestor had failed once, none of their descendants would exist. The answer reveals some of the most sophisticated cooperative behavior ever to evolve, behavior the modern world has quietly walked away from. Why human babies are born broken. Most animals arrive ready to move. A newborn giraffe drops nearly 2 meters and is trotting within an hour. Even chimpanzees can cling to their mothers almost immediately. Human infants do none of this, remaining utterly dependent on others for months, a specific evolutionary trade-off scientists call secondary altriciality, meaning human babies are born at an earlier relative stage of development than nearly any other primate. The cause is brain size. A fully developed human brain at birth would require a skull too large to pass through the birth canal, so evolution made humans give birth early, essentially premature by design. A newborn's brain is only about a quarter of its adult size, compared to roughly 45% in a newborn chimpanzee, meaning brain development other species complete in weeks instead unfolds over years, entirely outside the womb. This is the obstetric dilemma. A human infant cannot survive alone under any circumstance, since the species cannot reproduce without social support built into its biology, transforming ancient child survival from individual skill into group structure. The phrase, "it takes a village to raise a child," has become a cliché. For most of human evolutionary history, it was a literal survival strategy, one anthropologists believe may help explain why Homo sapiens outcompeted every other hominin species. The relevant theory is cooperative breeding. In most primate species, child-rearing falls almost entirely on the mother, sharply limiting how many dependent offspring she can support at once. Humans broke from this pattern dramatically, distributing childcare across the entire social group. Grandmothers played an especially outsized role, generating the grandmother hypothesis, developed in the 1990s by anthropologist Kristen Hawkes. The theory proposes human menopause, itself highly unusual in the animal kingdom, evolved to free older women from reproduction so they could redirect energy toward their grandchildren's survival, since experienced grandmothers proved so valuable that evolution found it more efficient for them to help raise everyone else's children instead. A maternal grandmother's presence significantly raises a child's odds of survival in traditional societies. Research on the AK people of Central Africa found fathers within arm's reach of their infants roughly 47% of the time, exceeding most fathers in industrialized societies today. This was not philosophy, it was survival engineering, how ancient parents physically kept infants alive. Breastfeeding in ancient societies looked nothing like the modern default. Traditional societies and our closest primate relatives typically nursed children for 2 to 4 years or longer, a pattern the World Health Organization still echoes by recommending breastfeeding to age 2 or beyond. Hunter-gatherer mothers nursed far more frequently too, with some studies estimating as often as 4 times an hour during early infancy, which provided nutrition, regulated stress response, and acted as a natural contraceptive that spaced births roughly 3 to 4 years apart. A hunter-gatherer mother walking kilometers a day to gather food could not simply set a helpless infant down. Since predators existed, the infant could not regulate its own temperature, and a crying baby left alone became a beacon for anything nearby that hunted. The solution was constant physical contact, now called baby-wearing. Newborns possess a strong grasping reflex, likely a remnant of clinging to a caregiver, and skin-to-skin contact regulates heart rate, breathing, body temperature, and stress hormones. Cross-cultural surveys found infants carried throughout the day cry roughly 50% less than infants left alone, not because they are spoiled, but because the contact meets a genuine biological need. Ancient infants were almost certainly carried for the majority of their waking hours, a sharp contrast to a century of modern advice favoring cribs and separate rooms. Eventually, every infant needs food beyond milk, and the most common softening method was pre-mastication, adults chewing food before transferring it directly into an infant's mouth, which transfers bacteria from adult to infant, though research suggests some of it may benefit immune development. Children also received soft, calorie-dense foods early, including bone marrow, mashed plant foods, eggs, and small portions of fish or meat, and dental remains suggest hunter-gatherer children generally had better nutrition and fewer cavities than early agricultural populations dependent on starchy grains. Sleep followed the same logic. In essentially every observed hunter-gatherer society, infants slept against an adult's body all night rather than in a separate crib, a practice called co-sleeping, representing the default human behavior for roughly 99% of our species' existence. Modern Western caution around bed sharing stems from real concerns about suffocation, risk in soft bedding with impaired caregivers, risks that do not translate directly to ancestral conditions of firm surfaces and sober caregivers. Documented benefits include more stable body temperature, more regulated breathing, and longer breastfeeding duration, and anthropologist James McKenna has proposed that a sleeping adult's breathing may help regulate an infant's own breathing during a developmental window when that regulation remains unreliable. Either way, human-infant physiology evolved expecting physical contact through the night, and the separate nursery is a remarkably recent invention. What ancient humans knew, and what we quietly forgot, none of this erases a harder truth. Infant mortality was staggeringly high for most of human history, with estimates suggesting 30 to 50% of children in Paleolithic and early Neolithic populations died before age 5, not from a lack of care, but from the absence of germ theory, antibiotics, vaccines, and modern nutrition science, advances that have driven child mortality down roughly 96% since 1800. Ancient humans still worked with what they had. Medicinal plant use appears ancient, with archaeological evidence of deliberate herb use stretching back at least 50,000 years, and willow bark, the original source of aspirin, treated pain and fever for thousands of years. None of this could defeat bacterial meningitis, but it was not nothing. Every recorded human culture also developed ceremonies around birth and early childhood, ceremonies that bound communities around a child and provided a framework for processing grief when children died, which happened often. Archaeological infant burials, frequently arranged carefully with grave goods or flowers, contradict any notion that ancient parents were indifferent to loss. They mourned, and across thousands of years, slowly accumulated enough knowledge to improve the odds. A meaningful share of what ancient humans did to keep children alive outperformed what replaced it, though not everything. Vaccines, clean water, and modern medicine are not up for debate, and the collapse of child mortality across the 20th century remains one of humanity's greatest achievements. This changed how you think about parenting and human history. Hit like, subscribe for more deep dives into the science of human evolution, and drop a comment with the part that surprised you most.